Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, How 2 Health Systems Found Their Next Nurses Already on the Payroll. Before we begin, I will walk us through a few quick housekeeping instructions. We will begin today's webinar with a presentation, and we'll have time at the end of the hour for a question and answer session. You can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar by typing them into the Q&A box you see on your screen. Today's session is being recorded and will be available after the event. You can use the same link you used to log into today's webinar to access the recording. If at any time you have issues with audio or visual, please try refreshing your browser. You can also submit any technical questions into the Q&A box, and we are here to help. With that, I am pleased to introduce today's speakers. Ivan Mitchell, Chief Executive Officer for Great Plains Health, Brandy Irwin, Vice President of Patient Care and Chief Nursing Officer for Sierra View Medical Center, Jeffrey Hudson, President of Association of California Nurse Leaders and co-founder of Sierra View Medical Center School of Nursing, powered by Unitek College, and Celia French, VP of Marketing, Workforce Development for Unitek Learning. Thank you, Ivan, Brandy, Jeff, and Celia for being here today, and I'll now turn the floor over to Celia to get us started.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for this discussion on workforce and developments that are happening in this space with 2 hospitals. I'd love to introduce you to our panel speakers today. We'll start with Sierra View.
Hello, I'm Jeff Hudson. I am the former Chief Nurse Executive of Sierra View. I retired earlier this year after 12 years at the facility. And so I welcome you to the discussion.
Hi, my name is Brandy Irwin. I am the current Chief Nurse Executive for Sierra View, and I'm excited to help others do what we've done here.
And for Great Plains?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Ivan Mitchell. I'm the CEO of Great Plains Health. Been there about 11 years, 6 years as the COO, and the last 5 years as the CEO. And excited to talk with you today about what we're doing and hopefully following in the footsteps of Sierra View here.
Terrific. Thank you for that. Would like to start the conversation by just doing a little framing of how each organization has thought about this as a tactic that they would bring to their workforce. So Dr. Jeff or Brandy, perhaps you could frame up why you've chosen to work with this specific program.
Now, I'll lead with that question. Thank you. So yeah, Sierra View at the time, back in 2019, had a pretty severe shortage of RN vacancies. And at that time, I knew Dr. Youssef from Unitek, and he had invited me at a conference to a lunch. He had an idea he wanted to talk to me about. So in early 2019, we began to talk about the possibility of Unitek and Sierra View forging a partnership that would place a School of Nursing with the partnership of Unitek College on our campus. And that seemed to resonate with us both. We needed to go back to our individual organizations and try to figure out how this could possibly work. We know it sort of had worked at other places across the country, but we both didn't have individual knowledge about maybe how to spark this and get it going. So with that, we went back to our organizations, began to talk about it and sort of frame how we could move forward. And then we had 2020 arrive. And with that, COVID sort of put a back spin on this so that we couldn't really move forward with it at that time. And so although the idea was still in germination and our teams had started to work on this, we sort of had to put it into the rearview mirror for a while. In 2022, now with the vacancy even larger as COVID had sort of caused bigger vacancies across our organization, it was even more prudent for Dr. Youssef and I to get back together. And so we did. And that began the solid relationship, the due diligence, which I'll talk more about as we move forward. But that really cemented the spark, the energy, and the motivation to create innovation of how this could work.
Perfect. Thank you. Brandy, would you want to add anything to how it may have shifted and changed today now that it's up and running?
Yeah, thank you. So I think that staff became excited. At the time when all the discussion was going on, I was the director of acute care, and I was the units with all of the nursing shortages, or a large majority of them. And what we saw on the units is a lot of our own staff and their want to get into a program, but their barriers. And they really needed this program. So it sparked a lot of excitement and a lot of questions from staff. And also the senior staff, or long-term nurses on the floor, really helped elevate some of the ancillary staff to going into the programs. So there was a lot of excitement. And what we see now is the same thing. We see a lot of support for our new graduates. We've had our first graduating class, and the first Unitek graduating class was all Sierra View staff. And we've seen them blossom, and the excitement of everyone when they're getting ready to take their boards and their graduation. We had a lot of staff show up for their graduation just to support those ancillary staff that were previously on the unit. So a lot of excitement, a lot of engagement with staff is what we're seeing.
Fantastic, thank you. And Ivan, I was think you bring a great perspective as the CEO of the hospital, and the things that you're thinking about as you're trying to bring more opportunities for your workforce and solve some of these challenges.
Yes, absolutely. Kind of in a similar time frame, before the pandemic, I serve on the Hospital Association board, and every hospital that I have met to is struggling to get the appropriate amount of nurses, even before the pandemic. We ended up really leaning into international recruitment, and we were bringing a lot of nurses over from the Philippines, from the Caribbean. And then when the pandemic hit, the immigration pipeline stopped. And so and it was even hard to get travelers at that time. So I think that when you look at all of the issues that any hospital is dealing with, whether it be financial, whether it be quality, whether it be staffing, is all basically related to the supply and demand for staff and being able to appropriately staff your area. Looks like my light here turned off, but so for us, we have been sharing with our board every month where we're at with contract labor, and we've been anywhere in the last 5 years between $6 million and $13 million annually, and so it's been a challenge for us, and we were looking at unique ways to staff our facility. We are the large hospital in Western Nebraska. You look at us, we're 116 beds. Doesn't sound like we're that big, but we do interventional cardiology, we do neurosurgery. So we have a pretty strong and robust service offering. And as it mentions, we have 17 independent critical access hospitals that surround us. So it really is very difficult when we hit capacity, can't take transfers. We typically have beds, but we don't necessarily have staffed beds. And so if we turn away a transfer, that patient is traveling an additional 100 miles. And you can think of the burden that causes to that family and to that person trying to recover from their illness. So that got us to where we are today.
Yeah, thank you. I think you have an interesting issue to solve too, where just your local pool to hire from, there just aren't enough graduates coming out of the local school systems to be able to fill the number of nurses that you need. And so you have a unique challenge just geography-wise as well, like where you're located.
We do, yes. I think our local college graduates 32 a year. If you look at the national nursing turnover rate, we would need about 50. We would need 48.6 nurses a year just to maintain what we have. And then if you look at, that's the only nursing program for the nursing homes and critical access hospitals around us. So I think we need to be producing about 90 a year, just to meet current demand. So it's pretty severe, and I think most areas are very similar. I think Brandy hit on some of the challenges of accepting people to nursing school. We're reading annually that about 90,000 qualified candidates aren't being accepted. And so there's a systemic issue with the way we train and the way we do things in the United States.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to move on to some of the next questions to just kind of think through, like, as you were looking at a program like this, um, what changed when you started looking at your existing workforce as your primary talent pipeline? Um, Maybe Dr. Jeff would want to talk about that. What was the shifting in thinking internally?
Now, our internal paradigm in the Central Valley of California is more rural than it is urban or suburban. However, we are mostly surrounded by state uh, universities and community college. Much like Ivan, we have a community college in our direct town. However, it only graduates 20 students a year. Since all of this has happened, they are increasing their pipeline, but we didn't have enough uh, nurses coming out of school from both the university system, the community college system, and one private college. So this would help us, we knew, to create some promise that the pipeline could be infused with graduates who would also be loyal to the community in which they lived. Many times we get a lot of students who graduate from other areas of California. They primarily need a place to work for about a year before they can get on in the area that they live in. So the Central Valley of California sort of becomes a moving pipeline for graduates throughout the rest of the state. And so Brandy and her team could maybe keep a nurse about a year until they're ready to go back home where they can get a year after their experience to get a full-time job. So we needed to break that paradigm. And so having, as Brandy eloquently talked about, our own staff in our programs would keep graduates in our area. And that came to be true of the graduates of this first class. They all stayed on and now are employed at the hospital. We have another cohort that will graduate in the fall that is also all staff. We sort of break that paradigm as we get into cohort number 3, and that has a mixed cohort of both employees and the community. So we still believe inherently that those even in the community who are going to go to Unitek on our campus will hopefully stay within the community and fill those vacancies that are left behind or open as people shift in the workforce. So we were very deliberate in what we wanted to get out of our outcome, almost being selfish that we wanted to be able to retain those that we educated. And that really was the goal.
Fantastic. And I think that's such an important goal, right? We hear that from hospitals all across the country, is that they're really looking for people that want to work there, that want to stay in the community and care for the community that they love, right? So it's such an important part of the strategy, and I love that it's working for you all. Brandy, how about maybe was there any internal skepticism when the idea first came forward, or some other obstacle that you needed to overcome?
I don't think we had any skepticism. We are an organization that kind of wraps our arms around different ideas and innovation. We're small, so we use a lot of different types of thinking to get to where we want to be. And I think that everybody was super excited. Some of the challenges that we faced were just how do we staff the floors while we support all of these ancillary staff and going to school. And so how do we create schedules and share staff and not make anybody feel like they're putting their unit at jeopardy, because there is a lot of loyalty to the units here, especially with the ancillary staff. And, you know, there was a lot of conversations that I had as a director where staff was worried that maybe they should wait because so-and-so on the same floor was going to apply for the program. And so it was about supporting them, telling them that we would be fine as an organization, we would make it work, and then figuring out how to make it work. And so we were able to do that. They were able to see that transition. not feel guilty about not being, able to work certain days of the week when, they had school, and just continuing to support them. So I think that was the biggest challenge, was really the staffing and pretending like everything was going to be okay until I figured it out. And then once you figure it out, then showing them we figured it out. So it was okay.
Yeah, excellent. Ivan, how about for you, from your perspective, was there a certain data point or insight that made this idea feel real, not just a good idea?
Yeah, I think I shared earlier the amount that we're paying in travelers, and we have been sharing this with our board, and so $6 to $13 million. If you replace those travelers with staff, you're probably netting $3 to $6 million annually, if that could happen. So this has been an ongoing discussion for us. There was I was attending one of our hospital association meetings back in 2022. And again, labor is the biggest issue. It is the leading issue that also rolls into any financial issues or any quality issues that we're having. And it was interesting, our three of the largest nursing programs in our state, two that are headquartered in Omaha and one that's headquartered in Lincoln, we're doing a panel discussion. We had the deans of the nursing school. And one of the deans said that we cannot educate the amount of nurses that we need in our state to replace our workforce. And all three of them were shaking their head like that was just the gospel truth. And so for me, it just doesn't make sense. We have 400 nurses. I should be able to have 400 clinical sites. You know what I mean? I have 400 full-time nurses. I should be able to have 400 clinical spots, and maybe not that many, but clearly we should be able to, if we can get some people to think out of the box a little bit and do things a little bit differently, we should be able to meet the needs of our community. And again, we have a lot of applicants that are trying to become registered nurses. It's a good job. It's a good field. It's challenging. It's not easy, but we need to find a way to partner with someone to educate our folks. And we'd been kind of kicking around, that we should start our own nursing program at some point, but clearly didn't have the expertise to do it. And so when I heard about what Unitek was doing, and as we reached out and talked to some of the hospitals in California and some other places that are doing this, it just seemed like the perfect fit for us. So I would say the data is the amount that we're spending and the amount of nurses that are getting turned away from nursing school. And then just the insight is this makes sense. And when we heard kind of the traditional academic world basically say we can't solve this issue, we knew we had to look somewhere else.
Yes, Celia, I think I might just expand on what Ivan's saying, just for the execs out there who are thinking about perhaps starting a program like this or are open to perhaps hearing more about it. I think the one thing that's really important, and Ivan touched on this, is that making sure that barriers are broke down for those individuals who need to be accepting of an innovative change. And that likely may start with your board, and being able to go to the board and be able to talk about this innovative idea, thinking about the impact, both financial to get the program up and going and sustain it, but also on the backside, the financial impact, such as Ivan talked about, with the travelers, the overtime, the incremental overtime, all those things that have added up over the annums to really help drive a different solution that would be in the long run more cost effective and better for the organization. So making sure that the board hears the idea, embraces the idea, certainly makes it a lot easier for the executive team to be aligned around this and to move the ball down the field. And I feel like that's sort of what was done at our facility, being able to talk about that we can't get enough students out of the programs that we have to fill the holes. And so we're going to keep going down this perilous pathway of travelers and all the other things that lead that way. So it was an easy decision for the board to make. It was a harder thing then for the executive team to put this together and make sure that we could deliver on what we had talked about. So I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's terrific. That is leading in right into my next topic, which was how did you make it an actionable plan? I think that is something that um, folks who are on the webinar today are looking for, like tangible. How did you do it? How did you turn it into action?
I sort of alluded a little bit to it already, how I got there, but that's just one piece, going to the board and getting them to approve the plan. It's another thing also when you got to get your executive team colleagues sort of embracing this idea, because it's taking the organization in a different direction, and it's not just impacting the chief nurse, it's impacting the CEO, other execs on the team, and it takes everybody to make this work. HR, quality,
Mhm.
operating officer, CEO, CNO, and others who may be on your team who are going to do the heavy lift to bring this to fruition. Most of the hard work lives with the nurse executive, but the nurse executive has to be able to navigate all of the pathways with their colleagues to make this happen. And so we put a work group together, both the team that was going to be working in tandem with Unitek and the internal team that was going to have to work on what Brandy sort of alluded to. How do we make this work internally, not only from the leaders getting together and understanding how this program is going to impact the organization, but then trickling it down into the organization, because ultimately the goal is to recruit our own staff, lift them up, and create new pathways for them to be financially strong and have a new profession. So those are all big pieces that had to come together.
Mhm. So it was an internal committee that you pulled together that represented cross-functional departments. And was it like, how did you think about dividing up the tasks?
Yeah, so in thinking about the internal team, um, things that we had to do internally to think about, such as Brandy talking about, how do you create schedules? How do you see the employees becoming students and now being taken out of the workplace for 2 days of clinicals a week potentially when they
Mhm.
start their rotation, but also learning as we went along in our groups that there also was going to be a third day, which is about testing in SimLab, which we didn't have our arms around really well in the beginning, but we certainly had to do it when our employees began to work into the second year of the program, when it becomes clinically part of their program. So these things had to be worked out. Also, internally, we had to develop a team. I led the team as the exec sponsor to work with the Unitek team. So there was an administrative team from Unitek, an administrative team uh, also with leaders and education experts from the hospital to work through the contract, work through the aspects of putting a robust sim lab on the campus, which we had a sim lab, but not to the ideals that we needed to have a school of nursing. So working through all of these things, who funds this, who funds that? How do you work through matriculating students? Obviously, the hospital cannot tell the school who to matriculate, but how do we work together as partners to help our employees be strong candidates for matriculation and registration, such as in California, taking the TEAS test. How do they take the TEAS test and be strong? We put on some workshops for them. We had some other ways for them to study for that test, which is one of the barriers that was really keeping our employees, regional areas, from getting into the community colleges and universities. They didn't have a strong preparation for the TEAS test. And for those who don't know what a TEAS test, it's the predictability of completing the program. It really looks at the student who's taking the test to see if they're going to be able to really fortify and complete the program. And so a lot of the criteria for getting into a program in California is based on that TEAS test and some other collateral criteria. But we want to do everything possible to make our employees and communities strong in being able to meet the criteria of Unitek and get in. And so that was another strong point that we had to make. So there's lots of different sort of silos that have to be done from a team approach to make this work. And having one exec over it, I think, help keep the noise and the barriers and all the things that come up along that journey sort of to a minimum, and allows the process to play out as we were learning how to do this the whole long way.
Mhm. Yes, thank you. That's great. And Ivan, it would be interesting to hear from your perspective since you're going through it right now. You're in the process of getting the program live. Um, how are you thinking about it at Great Plains? I also have a part two to the question, which is you've spoken some about the travel nursing expense. Were there other things that were important to you in calculating like the ROI that made this program a good choice for you?
Yeah, no, both great questions. A little bit different than Jeff. Jeff kind of, it sounds like he brought the program forward to his team. I kind of brought the program forward to my team. And so some hurdles internally, I think when you look at our chief nursing officer who's leading the program right now as our executive sponsor, and our chief quality officer, both on our executive team, they were a little concerned because, of course, they went through traditional nursing education. And so what's been really interesting is they have reviewed this, and you find out that Unitek, I think, is the fourth largest nursing program in the country. And you look at their pass rate, which is above 90%. You can see that the education is good and is solid. This is such a big topic for us. It is an executive team discussion. Obviously, at our weekly leadership team meeting, we've had some meetings that we discuss this longer, and others that are shorter. But we're going through the process now of getting state board approval. As Jeff alluded to, we've had a sim lab here for our education department, and it looks like we're going to have to beef that up a little bit. So we're going through that process of, what's our design going to look like? What space are we going to use? We're looking at utilizing some of our current nursing staff with master's degrees as faculty, and so we're walking through all of those issues right now. So that's where we're at, and it's been nice to pick Jeff's brain and kind of talk about maybe some of the issues that they had to deal with as they were putting this in place. So it's always nice to learn from others who forged the path. And I would say too, some of the big points we talked about travel nursing. I think like many rural communities. Most of your hospital leaders function somewhere in the economic development of your town and your community, and it's been always interesting to me where, and all of you who have worked in a hospital, you have a CNA, patient care tech, a medical assistant that is just exceptionally intelligent, exceptionally smart, but they're maybe in a life situation where they're not able to go through the structured programs that are out there today, that are Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. They still have bills they need to pay, kids they need to raise. And so one of the most exciting things for us is that we are able to take those employees that have been so wonderful over the years and have taken such good care of our patients. We're able to give them an option to grow in their career and, of course, scholarship them with a work commitment. But these are people that are currently invested. And so I think that's a good thing. I mentioned we focused a lot on international staff simply because, your 13-week traveler, a lot of times they're maybe coming from Denver or coming from Omaha. We're right in between the two. And they come for 13 weeks. You pay them a bunch of money, and that money, maybe other than a little bit, gets spent in another community. And so being able to grow our own staff members, bring people to our community, people that are committed to where we live and are going to have their kids go to school here. They're going to shop here. They're going to bank here. They're going to buy a home here. I think in the long run, it just really grows your community, your region, and I think it's a win-win all around. And those hospitals in Denver and Omaha, they're also struggling for nursing. So if we can eliminate as much agency and travel nursing opportunities, I think the whole healthcare community benefits from that. So I would say that is probably the other benefit for us. I do think you're going to find a lot of people that are going to be grateful to your organization for providing that opportunity to them. So I think it will be a big employee engagement and just something that really endears your staff to your organization.
I couldn't agree more. It's such a great point. Before we move on to some more on the culture and how it impacts your overall hospital and your community, I do want to ask Brandy, because I think you're in an interesting spot where you've taken over this program. You were involved in it and worked on it, obviously, but now that you've moved into the CNO role at your hospital, can you talk a little bit about that? How transitioning between executive leaders might work for someone who's thinking about this?
Yeah, I really think that I got lucky because Jeff set me up for success. So it was a very smooth transition where everything was already laid out. Every employee already had the job that they knew to do on the committees. So I really just stepped in and had them lead me through because, you know, he had already built such a strong foundation and everybody knew their role. It wasn't really much for me to do. I had already gotten to meet the Unitek dean, the staff, so I had already worked with them on the floor, so that was exciting. I got to meet more of them at graduation, which was kind of our handoff almost, even though Jeff had just left. It was the end of a session, and it was closing out. So I got to spend a lot of time with the employees that were going through the program more than the Unitek staff. And since everything was running so smoothly, we just kept everything as is. So lucky for me, there was not much for me to do because he had already prepared a handbook, really. Mm-hmm. So I just continued to go to the meetings and support the education staff as they help place the Unitek students for mentorship and just really a support person at this point.
That's great. Jeff, were there specific messaging points that you used to keep everyone internally on the same page, or, you know, progression metrics or things like that you were using that helped accomplish that?
That's a really good question, Celia. Yes, to all of those. So in our executive team meetings, I would frequently and consistently bring forward data on how our employees were doing in the program. Mm-hmm. If there were anybody who was struggling, what could we do as an organization to help them? Initially, when we started the program, we had some little pain points. For instance, we had told the students, if you get into trouble, make sure you make your instructor aware. The college wanted that, the same thing. Well, people did get into a little bit of trouble. Someone didn't get a computer. Another one was behind on their reading. So as we found out from the instructor staff back to the organization, we were able to step in also along with the school and support them from the institution side. Is there something that we could do? Was it a scheduling issue? Was it something that we needed to do on the hospital side to make them successful? Or was it on the matriculated college side? And how could they help? And if they were still having trouble, how could we together help the student move along? So I keep our executive team informed about that. We did have both, and Ivan equated to this, we had scholarships and tuition reimbursement. Some people got scholarships, some people got tuition reimbursement. And so we had financial stakes on the table to help individuals make it through the program. That was keenly a point that we needed to make sure the board understood. And so updates to the board on how students were doing, and also to the executive team that if there was some problem with a student who had their scholarship at risk because maybe they missed a class and didn't get the grade they needed to pass, what did we need to do as an institution to still support them and those sorts of things? So these kinds of things will happen during the course of the students in their course for the 3 years. And it's important to keep your colleagues informed of how this is progressing, because sometimes there's an HR issue. Got the quality leader at the table. Is there quality issues as we're now having students doing rotations up on the floor? Do we need to hear from our quality leaders? So all of these things were really important. They've been handed off to Brandy because you have to keep the information flowing. To do things in a vacuum will not work, as you know, with executive teams and boards. So keeping everyone informed is really important.
Terrific. One last question on this topic for Brandy. How do you think about partnering with your HR team on, this is when the employees are going to graduate. They're now an RN. They could move into this different role. How do you give them insights and visibility into that part of the pipeline?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And luckily, I had been on that end from the beginning when we decided to partner. My job was really working with HR recruitment and looking at the positions that we had available and the nurses that were coming through, getting ready to graduate, and where they would want to go, where would they be needed, and kind of supporting their decision along with the organization decision. And some of those opportunities were having some good conversations. It's easy when it's your staff and you're working with them all the time. Ivan talked about, really giving these staff members that have been instrumental in patient care and shown how knowledgeable they are, the support to go back to school and become a registered nurse. And I think in doing that, it opens the door to have some good conversations about their strengths and some opportunities for improvement and where they best fit in the organization, along with their preferences, and kind of meshing all that together and what the ability is available to absorb. Because you will have groups that, everybody wants to work in the ED or everybody wants to work in OB, and you'll have no positions or one position. So how do we still retain those students and keep them happy with what they wanted, where they want to go? And so some of that is, introducing and having these conversations about float pool opportunities and still getting some experience in that field. So I think that was kind of a big piece for me and HR is really knowing these people on a personal level and having these conversations and getting them into these panel interviews that we do and set up for our nurse residency program that we have here and supporting their journey. So that really is instrumental, and without a good HR partner, that's sometimes very hard to do. But we were very lucky here at CRVU, and we had very good support in our HR.
Terrific. Thank you for that. That leads to the next question that I wanted to bring out is about the outcomes and that part of bringing the employees who have now been through the program onto the floor. Can you talk a little bit about the impact of that? How do they meld in with your culture, or how does it work with your nurse residency? Those kinds of things. How do they do once they get out of the program?
Yeah, so we just have our first group graduate a few months ago, and they're doing phenomenally. I think one thing that I can say is the units are very, very supportive because of the fact that they've seen these individuals throughout their schooling, before schooling. They work side by side with them. They especially have strong bonds after working through the pandemic together. Our ancillary staff was super, super important for us. And the nurses on the floor really want to see them be successful. So I've had nurses have extra time sitting with, Unitek students that have been struggling in maybe a certain area. I know I've sat myself with nurses that were working through some pediatric stuff that they didn't feel comfortable with, and just spending that extra time and really, kind of drilling down to their needs really has changed things when they hit the floor, because we already feel like we've been mentoring them for so long, and now, we're here finalizing that success really. So they each, came and spoke with me about, who they would want to precept with, what units they would want to go to. And so we were able to make most of those things happen. And so I think it's just excitement all around. It was very good for our culture because instead of having travelers like Jeff was talking about earlier, coming and going and not being invested, we have these nurses that we've seen grow up and are vested, and they care about our patients, they care about our community, they're with our community, and it really has stabilized our nursing shortage. I had more interviews than more interviews than positions open. So it wasn't like everybody was getting a spot. We really had to figure out how we're going to pick the best candidate for the role. Not that we would pick every nurse before, but you know, when you have 10 good candidates and eight openings, where do they go and how do we continue to support them? And we're very fortunate because we were able to take all of our graduates and offer them a position. And I think that just sparked even more enthusiasm.
Celia, I might just add a little bit on that, if I may. You know, we talked initially about the cost of the program. Well, yes, there is some cost to the organization, but it also comes out in great outcomes. So we also started a graduate medical education program with 40 internal medicine residents about the same time that we did the nursing program. And so with that, I talked a little about, Ivan also talked about having to sort of boost our sim labs. We were very much about clinical roles using the sim lab. Now we have students using the sim lab. So although we put some cost into the sim lab and did some education for those that would be proctoring the sim lab, the outcome was really much better because now our own internal programs in collaboration with our School of Nursing had a more robust sim lab and in fact did things together where we would see students working with students or staff working with students. And so this just increased the sort of reliance on each other as a team and builds that team mentality amongst the groups. It moved the culture from the beginning. We really had always stressed at Sierra View to be a learning organization. Well, with graduate medical education, a school of nursing, and various other clinical modalities rotating through our hospital as students, I think we can proudly say this institution is a learning organization. And so it also changed care delivery. It changed how we looked at our patients, who was providing the care. We moved our clinical rotations from being during the day. Now they were on evenings and even on nights. So it just changed the whole picture of the organization. And Ivan, I would say that's likely coming your way, that as you start to think about where you put these students and how they integrate with other clinical rotations and students and your own staff, there's some things that happen along the way that you have to break down some barriers, deeper understanding, and a premise of acceptance across the board. So with that, I'll stop there.
And I would add, I'll jump in there. We announced this program to our staff. We have kind of an annual meeting at the first of the year, and we have seen a lot of excitement. I think culturally, it's been a benefit even just announcing it and saying that we're doing this. We're on a Becker's podcast here and video cast, but every time you read Becker's and you hear about issues at an organization, a lot of it comes down to some issues with nursing and maybe they're striking, and everything that you read is about like nurse to patient ratios. And so, I think that in the past we've said, we're trying to hire anyone we can. We're trying to bring in as many people as we can. Now they're actually saying, here's something very concrete that we're doing. And, you're kind of in a tough position, if you don't have enough nurses and, they're coming and complaining to Brandy and Jeff, and eventually that comes up to the CEO and they're kind of blaming you for not having the staff that you need. And so I just think this is going to solve so many of the issues that so many hospitals are dealing with throughout our country right now.
Fantastic. That was such a great high note. I'm going to move on to the next topic. But advice. I think folks who are viewing this webinar, some of them are here looking for some advice. And so I guess I'll start with you, Ivan. Do you have any advice on capabilities you would recommend building internally to support this kind of project as you're working through it right now, and have some fresh perspective on that?
Well, I think you're just going to have to build the capability of innovation. And I don't think people talk about AI and all these other things, and we're trying to do maybe a lot of these things that are kind of out of the box, but bring it back to the core. We're here for patient care, and what we're doing right now is not meeting the needs and not meeting the staffing levels that are necessary. So we are going to have to do something different. And so I think that's something that that capability needs to be built within your leadership team and your frontline managers, because they are going to be the ones that are going to be out there striving to support these students every day. And just really being clear and honest about the struggles that you're having. As I shared with you, every board report, we had a list of, here are the locum physicians we have, here are our traveling nurses, here are the numbers that we're at, here's the cost. And I think if you are framing that up so that when the right opportunity arises, there isn't a lot of education you need to do. And so I think that just really showing your team that we're going to be innovative. We have clearly defined the problem, and when you're searching for that solution and it comes, they're just really it just makes sense to everyone. There isn't a lot of training that you need to do. So start now and make sure that you're very clear about the struggles that you're having with staffing. And as I've shared, that kind of feeds into everything else. It feeds into finance. It feeds into everything, all the other challenges that we have in the healthcare system right now.
Terrific. And anything you would want to say about what you think leaders might be getting wrong, or misperceptions that they might have about the nursing shortage?
I think the one thing I would add is that no one's going to come and save you. We saw it during the pandemic. We had to figure it out, and we're still in that situation. You look at the amount of nurses that we're educating every year. It's not enough to meet the demand that we have, and we have growing demand. So there's we're doing signing bonuses higher than we've ever done. We're throwing out as many gimmicks as we can, and I'm not saying those are gimmicks. I think those are good things. But no matter what you do there, and you can see we've escalated all these things, and everyone is still short-staffed. So it's a math issue. It's supply and demand. It's and I think a lot of the times when people say the culture is difficult, the environment's difficult, it's because there's not enough staff, and people are feeling overburdened, overworked, and so you need to figure out that solution. You have to solve that problem, and everything else is just kind of it's nice, but it's ancillary to the root cause and the root issue. So I think people are thinking that some great signing bonus is going to fix their problem. It's not. You're going to have to figure out a way to fix the supply side of this thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always like to say it's more tools, right? It's not replacing some of the other things that you're doing that are working so well at helping fill your workforce needs. It's just another tool to add in. Okay, for Jeff or Brandy, if someone in the audience was thinking about this but hasn't acted, what's the first step they should take? What should they be thinking about first?
Well, I will speak first, Brandy. I think going back to some of the things I said, and I'll elaborate on this, I didn't really talk about this, but in the state of California, just earlier this year, a report was published by the state that demonstrated the Central Valley of California, not the north, not the south, that we typically know as San Francisco and Los Angeles and along the coast. In the Central Valley, where agriculture is number one, we have a moderate shortage of nurses that still exists. So I did not have that data to work with. I knew it intuitively, but now it is there for us to be able to see. Our own county, we operate in a county called Tulare. Almost 60% of our patients are Medicaid or Medi-Cal. So with that, we have the perfect storm as safety net hospitals, and yet we have a huge vacancy of nursing. So just going back to what we've talked about on this broadcast with everyone is that you've got to come up with some program, some innovative program that is going to retain your nurses. I talked about nurses coming and leaving. Here is a program that is tried and true in our own Central Valley with managing up our own staff, having them apply to nursing school, who are pharmacy techs, dietary techs, registrars, all those kinds of things that typically may never have a chance to go to nursing school or even think that they could go to nursing school, and fill our cohorts with those individuals, and then have the graduating class stay 100%. And to Brandy's speaking, had a job in the hospital. That is tremendous success. I know she's already looking at the second graduation that's coming up in the fall. I'm sure she'll talk about that in a minute and what she plans to do with that class. But it's about making an internal decision and bringing the stakeholders together to help drive the innovation forward. And with us, that was working with Unitek, both internally and externally with them, to make this come to fruition. Back to you, Cecilia.
Fantastic. Brandy, anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just say, if somebody's thinking about this, I would say don't be scared. Fear holds us back so much. And if you think about the cost of the program and all the money that we put into other things, what is going to be for your best benefit? We put in a lot of money for, sign-on bonus, like Ivan was saying, but also turnover. How much are you spending in turnover versus how much would it be to trial something like this? Don't let fear hold you back. And we cannot keep doing things the same way. Our nursing shortage is not going away, like Jeff said. Nurses are moving into all different types of careers and needing that RN license to do these careers. So what is it that we're going to start doing different to get people to the bedside, get nurses to the bedside? So innovative, look at what your areas of concern are and start thinking about how you use a program like this to fill that void. I really think that is something that people have to start thinking about.
Fantastic. Okay, we're going to leave it at that. I think we have just a few minutes left today, so I'm going to move on to some questions. We do have a lot of questions coming in from the audience, and so specifically for Sierra View, if either Jeff or Brandy want to answer this one, the question is, what signals told you early that this program would work?
Well, I think thinking back on it was the interest that was generated internally, even with the spark of the idea, and having an opportunity for our staff to be able to meet with Unitek college admissions people to help generate interest in the program and what that would mean to them. Because it's more than just working, it's also now adding 3 years of school on top of working. And so they had to think through that and make their decision. But I think, as I look back, we had more applicants than we could put in our first cohort. And that played true on the second cohort. And so those individuals then would spill over into the next cohort. So we would try to keep their interest up. Don't feel bad that you didn't get in. We only have so many people that can get into a cohort. So keeping that alive was very important. And we never didn't have a full cohort. And I think, Brandy, we must be on cohort 7 now, I think, something like that, is getting ready to matriculate into the program. So I would say that's probably for those of you watching, making sure that there's a spark to get people interested, and not only just for the students, but to keep your team involved as well. So that they kind of get what's going to be happening, how it's going to affect them, how they work with their employees to make this come to fruition. Because if you don't have both individuals being informed, the student and the leader, it's destined to have some crash cycles along the way. We can speak to that. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm so sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
I was just going to add, I think as a nursing director on the floor, and I think a lot of nursing managers, one of the things that I thought about when this program was introduced in the beginning, thinking when Jeff was working on it, was I could name in my head like 5 people that I was going to talk to about getting into the program that really struggled to finish some of the prerequisite courses at the local college just because there was not enough space, and then trying to apply along with 80, 90 other people to get into those 20 spots a year. So I just felt like it was going to be successful from the get-go just because there was a want and there was definitely a need.
Okay, terrific. And for Ivan, someone is asking that you did allude to it, that you've announced to employees that something like this is coming. They're wondering what the response has been to the opportunity.
Yes, we've had a tremendous response in conjunction with Unitek. They kind of walk you through, messaging this to your team. We've done an internal survey. I think we've had about 80 people say that they are interested in our program. And so we get questions about it all the time. We're going through unfortunately, those, getting the program accredited by the State Board of Nursing takes a little bit longer than we'd like. So we're looking at fall of 27 to start this. And, but it takes time. We've also partnered with, in one of your slides, you were showing that we had 17 hospital partners that are around us. Almost all of those are independent hospitals. There's one that's part of a system. And we routinely have meetings with their leadership team, and we shared with them that we're doing this. And our plan is to set aside about 20% of our spots for those small hospitals that are around us. And there's just excitement there as well, because many of them have, these same individuals that they know are strong and solid. They'll be able to do as much of their clinical time in their community as they can, but a lot of these places don't have behavioral health, ICUs, things like that. So they're going to have to come here as well. But there's just been a lot of excitement about that. Every time I meet with the leaders, they're asking about progress in the program. So I have no doubt, just as Brandy mentioned, there's no doubt in my mind that this is going to be extremely successful, not only for us, but for our region.
Fantastic. Okay, and then I think we have time for one last question, and this was for Sierra View. The question is, how did you ensure that this was integrated into the operations and not sitting on the side?
Wow. I think we've talked a lot about this,
Yeah.
but making sure that it's not an internal function, it's not an external function, it's an integrated function between the institution and the college. Without that integrated process, you cannot do this. It just won't work. So figuring out how to set your team up internally, having Unitek already experienced on their side, how to do this with organizations, and believe me, they will help you do this. They've got a lot of experience now as they come into new institutions. We were on the forefront of being one of the first campuses to do this. So I just think that you have to think about operating outside of a silo, and you have to be willing to listen to others and they be willing to listen to you, because it is absolutely a two-way street to make this opportunity come to fruition. And so I would just point back that integration is the avenue for which this has to occur, and making sure that there's a senior sponsor on the institution side and a senior sponsor on the Unitek side is very important, so that the teams know who they report to, how this works, and that you're able to perhaps, when there's an impasse or there's something that needs to be made as far as a decision that the local teams cannot, that you're there to help and support them to move the ball forward. Otherwise, it will just sit, and that's not good for either team. So I would just share that when I talk about integration, Celia.
Thank you. All right. Any final remarks? No? Okay. I think, oh, sorry, did I cut you off?
Celia, I would just say my final remarks would be, this is one of the best things I think that ever happened to Sierra View. I'm hoping Brandy has a big smile on her face, because this really was an opportunity to fill a vacancy hole that we could never get our arms around. This was, in some ways, a Hail Mary to try and mediate the vacancy rate. And so I'm a proponent of it. We've now had it come to fruition and more to come. So I'm a big supporter of the integration of the institution and the college, making a school of nursing.
And I would just add this organization, Unitek, they really know what they're doing, and appreciate Sierra View helping put together this program. But from my perspective, they come in knowing clearly what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, when it needs to be done, what the requirements are, and so you couldn't ask for a better partner to help you through this journey.
Terrific. Thank you so much for that. And thank you all for agreeing to participate today. I think it was a fantastic discussion. Congratulations on being such forward-looking leaders. And, from my perspective, congratulations to your employees for giving them such a big opportunity and helping them realize their dream. Many of them have always wanted to be a nurse, and now they're in a program that will help them do that. So congratulations to them as well. But thank you all for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is all the time we have for today. I want to thank Jeff, Brandy, Ivan, and Celia for an excellent presentation, as well as Unitek Learning for sponsoring today's webinar. Thank you all for joining us today, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.